Hello, wonderful podcast listeners. It is I, Jack, your podcast host for this week, and this is episode 108 of The Best Games Period. And of course, it wouldn't be a great episode, as it certainly will be, without the amazing and incredible Naomi Lugo.
And trusty.
I didn't say it this time.
I feel like if you don't say it, now everyone's going to think I'm not trustworthy. You've already set that precedent, and we got to keep up that facade. Otherwise, I'm doomed. In what situation, I don't know, but yeah, I'm doomed.
I also don't want them to think of you as a horse, though, because you also have brought that up. And more troublingly, reinforced it with last week's pick that you are entirely responsible for. I did not suggest it. I am entirely
responsible for that. That was all me, guys. So, last week's episode was an honorable mention, and I decided that I wanted to play the mobile game My Horse Prince, which is just about as amazing as you would think it is. It is a dating sim where you date a horse with the guy's face, and it's never confirmed if he's like a mystical creature or something like that. Your main character just kind of sees him as a pretty boy faced horse. So take that as you will. But yes, I played that game for like 3 days straight because it does take a lot of time, and I did not know this. But I did actually beat the game. I did not play the last 3 additional chapters because I am done. I'm very, very done. But I promised, I think, last episode that I would finish it for you guys, and I did. And the ending, yeah, it just kind of ends. So, yeah, I don't know what I expected. Maybe
how does it end? Do they get married?
No, it just ends. So the big finale is this race, of course, against Yuma's rival, and when you fill up the energy meter thing, you win the race. And so Yuma has this big thing to tell you after the race has been beaten, all the excitement is over, and he never really gets a chance to say it because your character's like, yes, I'm gonna be a jockey, I'm awesome, because for some reason she had to ride Yuma in the last race, and so it kind of ends there as kind of this big joke, and it's like, okay. I was expecting like sparkle rainbows and riding off into the sunset, but no. I mean, maybe that's in the last 3 bonus chapters, but yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that is a game that exists, and you can play it, and you can
for
listen
free.
And you can listen to Naomi talk about it on last week's episode. And so before we get into this week's topic, which in case you didn't know is Doki Doki Literature Club, which we have talked about briefly in past episodes, but this week we're going to dive into it. But before we get into all of that, we have a few things I think we're going to talk about first, like maybe some current events, or perhaps what we've been playing.
Oh yeah. We do that. We game. We do that thing.
All kinds of things that we could talk about, but what do you want to talk about, Naomi?
So I guess we can talk about the most infuriating bit of news first, and that's Ninja and his lovely comments about not wanting to stream with women because, because that would upset the girlfriend or wife or whatever, and tabloids talk about that kind of thing. Yeah, what a great reason. I saw a pretty awesome tweet. It was like, if Ninja was bisexual, would he be able to play with anyone? And that perfectly encapsulates how I feel about his statements. We do know that it is possible for people to be friends with each other. And I say that loosely. I don't say men and women. I say people in general, because there's such a big spectrum of people who are attracted to other people. There's people who aren't attracted to anyone. There's just so many different factors out there. I can't believe anyone thinks that I can't play with women because of this is even a valid thing to say. It's just so nonsensical to me.
See, I can believe it, but that's mostly...
Well, I can believe it, but it's just disappointing, you know.
Well, so I've actually encountered that sort of belief before. It was when... So when I was back in college, I would help out with a campus Christian group, and I would set up equipment and speakers and whatnot for their weekly get-togethers and all that stuff, and attended a few Bible studies and things like that. But after one of the Bible studies, I remember talking with one of these guys, and he's basically just telling me, "Oh no, you can't actually be friends with people who are the opposite gender from you." I was like, "Why? That makes no sense." And he was like, "Well, see, here's this video," and like he showed me this video where basically this guy is walking up to couples in public, and by couples I mean that in the loosest possible term of two people like just sitting together who are either dating or just friends, or maybe just study partners or whatever, just walking up to them and then asking them very intrusive questions about the nature of their relationship. And like basically
what could go wrong?
Basically what it boiled down to was like asking the guy, would you go out on a date with this lady? And a lot of times they would say yes. And that was the video's proof that women and men can't be friends. And
okay.
I can't remember what the actual, like, who made the video or what it was. This was like, gosh, 8 years ago, something like that. But the point is, like, I saw that, I was like, that makes no sense. And like, if you really break it down, it's incredibly
possessive of people.
Yeah, well, that,
like,
and also it's just it's a very binary view of gender, which is not something that has ever made sense to me, where, oh, you are woman, and therefore I, a man, must have sexual feelings for you, and so that means we can't be friends because so I'm kind of waffling around my thoughts on this because there are a lot of things that play into this kind of stance, and I think part of it is a very heterosexual view of the world that assumes that a man is going to be cheating on their significant other with any woman that they might spend significant time with on a professional or personal level. Like, if they're just friends, that means that he's eventually going to cheat or something like that. It also assumes that the only relationship dynamic that fundamentally works is, a two-person relationship, which I don't know that that's true. There are people out there who are in stable 3-person relationships or more, and that could be fine. Like, I'm not going to make any judgments on that.
It's very close-minded, and it sets this precedent for other people, because Ninja is obviously one of, if not the biggest streamer in the world right now. It sets this precedent for a bunch of other streamers and everyone in the industry, even in entertainment largely, that this kind of thinking is okay. Like, it's okay to exclude women because you feel threatened by anything, really. Like, that reason he gave is very shaky. Like you said, there are just so many different factors. Like, people are non-binary, people are pansexual. It's not just this heteronormative stance in the world. Like,
one of the things that bothers me the most, if you take him at his word, even if you grant him everything else, it is a complete capitulation to the worst people on the internet. Like,
yeah.
it is essentially letting harassers dictate their own terms and then abiding by them. Like, you are saying, oh, people will say things, so I'm just not going to do this thing. And that in a vacuum might be fine, but when you're talking about as a general rule or conducting business or, you know, whatever, and it's not just, like, I don't know a whole lot about Ninja, but I assume being the largest streamer in the world is basically your business. That's your livelihood. You can't do that. like
no.
Imagine going into your workplace and just saying, I can't work with women because people might talk.
Or my girlfriend will get mad at me. Like, what?
Yeah.
Figure out your relationship. That doesn't sound good.
And the other part of this is, like, okay, people might talk, but that why does that matter? I guess. Like,
yeah.
I don't know much about Ninja, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that he doesn't get like overwhelming waves of harassment. If anything, the women that he would hang out with might be the ones that would be getting the overwhelming waves of harassment. Or, as a fun thought experiment, twist this on its head and say that the largest female streamer in the world just says, I'm not going to stream with men.
There would be, like, Armageddon right now.
They would have world come down on them. In fight. Like, the same people who are defending Ninja the most religiously would attack her, like, completely. And
yeah,
it's
definitely.
just... And I say that because I've seen it happen. I literally have a friend who had to change their entire identity. They literally had to go into hiding and change their name because of the internet harassing them. So... that's crazy. But that's the world we live in, and I don't know, people always seem so worried about how to say this. People always seem so worried about masculine reputation. That's the word I'm looking for. Like, you can see it anytime there's a talk about sexual harassment allegations or sexual assault allegations or, you know, anything to do with sex in general. You can see people come out of the woodwork to say, but what about so-and-so's reputation? Or this is going to hurt their business. And it's like, at the end of the day, you look at people who have actually done things, like, say, Bill Cosby. He had an incredibly successful career, even though it was an open secret in the circles he was in that he was sexually assaulting all these women and drugging them. And it still, even with everyone knowing, took, what, like 30 years for them to actually do anything about it? And that's the kind of armor that masculine reputation has in our world. And so Ninja's reputation is going to be fine.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
go ahead.
Like, if someone who has literally drugged and sexually assaulted dozens upon dozens of women, their career can literally survive that for decades of them continuing to do that. I think he can survive and endure somehow playing some games with a woman on a stream.
And I just think it's extremely cowardly of him to do this, because as a white male in this extremely privileged position with a lot of people hanging on your every word, you decide to turn your back on women instead of understanding the situation you're in and being better and being a platform for women. And it's just really disappointing. I mean, not that I knew very much of Ninja either. He just kind of blew up when he, like, streamed with Drake. That's when he came on my radar. You know, I didn't care otherwise. But it is obvious that he has a lot of clout behind him and could have done something good with that. But instead, he's been very disappointing. So, yay. Woohoo.
Yeah. And yeah, it's to me, it's just not a good reason for excluding anyone. Like, oh no, it wasn't even his girlfriend who was saying do this. It was him deciding that he didn't want people to talk about their relationship like that and speculate about these things. And I just have to say that I think that comes from a place of privilege, because
oh, definitely.
If we flip this on its head, if you look at the most prominent female streamer, I don't even know who that is because I'm not huge on looking at streams or watching streams. I am willing to bet almost everything I own that there are people who follow them who constantly talk about who they're dating, who they're with, and obsess over those kinds of issues. Because that's just the nature of the internet. If you are a lady and have any amount of like notoriety, popularity, popularity is the word I'm looking for, right?
Maybe notoriety. Anyway.
The point is, Ninja actually has the privilege of worrying about whether or not people might think about him being in a relationship with someone else. Whereas that is not even an option for half of the people who use the internet. So, I don't know. That seems... The more you look at it, I think the flimsier it gets as a stance.
Yeah.
But I see it kind of being taken up as an issue by people who I think are fundamentally good people. I think that they look at his statement and they think that it is a sweet thing to want to protect your relationship. And I understand that perspective, but there's a difference between protecting something and being possessive of something.
Yeah.
And I think this falls into the latter category.
Yeah.
Rant
deep breath.
Done.
All right. Next news story. So, Pokemon Go EV Day just finished at the time of this recording.
Wait,
I caught a ton of shinies. No, it was this past weekend on the 11th and 12th.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't see any
No,
EVs.
you missed EVs? What?
I even pulled out my phone and I didn't see any.
You have to play between 1 and 4 on community days, and then you'll see EVs.
Boo.
And they
Isn't
spawn a
even.
ton more, and you get shiny potential. So, yeah, you missed on the shinies. That's okay, because I got a bunch of shinies. Like, I got more shinies than I've ever gotten in my entire life in one day. So, I used to think I was shiny cursed, and now I don't anymore. I caught like 20 of them in the 2-day span.
Wow.
Which made everyone hate me. So, yay! So, yeah, I'm going to work on getting my shiny Vaporeon, Flareon, Jolteon, Espeon, and Umbreon. And I'm excited.
Team Eevee Squad, out!
Woo! So anyway, the next one is going to be September 22nd, I believe. Make sure you double check that, guys. And it's going to be for the 2nd generation starter, Chikorita. So,
okay.
Yeah, there's going to be a ton of Chikoritas out in the world between, I'm assuming, 1 and 4. Again, check these times. Please do not, please do not use me as an atlas. Anyway, the shiny for Chikorita is not that great. It's just kind of slightly oranger and kind of gross looking. But, I mean, as Pokemon people, we have to collect them all, so I'll be trying to get a bunch of shinies that day. And plus, I don't have my 3rd evolution of Chikorita yet, so that'll be nice. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Do we have another news item?
Well, I was going to read a tweet that came out today, and this is going to date us, because as of this recording, this was tweeted 2 days ago. But it was just a nice little news tidbit, or depending on your perspective, a general news tidbit. So, This mother tweeted to Ninja Theory, which is a developer, and she said, "Thank you, Ninja Theory, for Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. It saved my son's life. After playing it through, he asked to go to the hospital for help. He couldn't take everything he'd been dealing with and had planned to kill himself. The game changed his plan. Thank you." So, I mean, you can take this with a grain of salt. I mean, this is a random person on the internet. Who knows where it came from? But I think it just represents what potential games or what potential impact games have for people. And Ninja Theory got a lot of press about their willingness to tackle the issue of mental illness. And I can't remember, was she multiple personality disorder or was she schizophrenia? Okay. They tackled schizophrenia as the main bulk theme in their game, and they did a pretty good job doing it. I didn't play the game myself, but this is what I've been hearing about it. So it's cool to be able to think about this again and know that video games are this fantastic reaching form that can potentially even save someone's life, like this woman tweeted out, so
yeah, I think it's also just a testament to what representation can do.
Yes.
And seeing versions of yourself or versions of your
what
condition
you're dealing with, stuff like that.
Yeah,
your life.
Your life. There you go. Yeah, seeing your life portrayed back to you, to give you a different perspective on yourself or what you're dealing with, or
just to know that you're not alone.
Yeah, and I think, to an extent, that's part of what happened there, at, being able to relate with that. I highly recommend Senua's Sacrifice, and you should definitely play it, and we can talk about it on the show. I would love to do that.
Okay.
But yeah, being able to see someone who's also battling their demons, that's a really powerful thing, and not battling their demons in like some abstract, like you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to get to seeing that parallel, but in a very literal sense, like Senua's she's schizophrenic. It's like, and seeing her deal with her disorder and fight against it and do her best, like that's a really powerful thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to bring up that tweet just because it at least perked my ears and made me think back on that game. So yeah. So on to the game of the week.
Well, before we do that,
all right,
I would just like to pimp out our Patreon, patreon.com/bestgames, where you can actually listen to Naomi and I. We're working on a thing for Extra Life Tabletop Appreciation Weekend that is coming up. By the time you listen to this coming weekend, you should totally participate, play some sweet tabletop games and such, and maybe tweet with the hashtag. But we're going to be doing Dungeons and Dragons, and I guess you will be hearing that episode, pretty soon. It'll be coming out in a couple days. It might not be coming out on a Tuesday. Maybe it might come a little sooner. Who knows? But we're actually going to be playing some Dungeons and Dragons, which we will also record and release over that weekend. And in order to do that, though, you need to make a character. So Naomi and I recorded some character creation for a character who is named now
Gnome Suni.
Who's not a gnome.
Nope. You get to listen to me bumble through D&D because I am a complete noob. I've never played it before, so
spoiler
that's pretty
alert.
Entertaining.
Spoiler alert. There is no other way to go through Dungeons and Dragons. Everyone bumbles. It's nonstop bumbling from everything I've experienced. So you're in good company.
Yay.
Yeah, so you can, if you donate $1 per month to our Patreon, you can get access to special, or more. More is always good, but $1 per month gets you access to special episodes, and that is one of them. So, patreon.com/bestgamesperiod to listen to that. And after that very ham-fisted plug, Doki Doki Literature Club.
Oh yeah, this game. So, for those of you who haven't played it, I mean, this show is always spoiler-ridden just because of the nature of it, but just in case you don't know what's going to go on, we're going to be talking about this game in depth, so this is one that we're going to definitely recommend you play if you'd like to. And it's free on Steam, but if you have already played it or you just want to listen to our take, keep on listening to us, but you have been warned. So, Doki Doki Literature Club is a visual novel that is, at least on the surface, a very typical anime-style dating sim, high school anime dating sim. And you play as this main character who we assume is male, and has women falling head over heels for them in a typical kind of dating sim fashion. But as you keep on going into the game, things start to turn very, very sinister and pretty creepy and weird, and it kind of becomes a whole different genre after all of that. And I would say that it kind of, maybe not kind of, but definitely goes into the realm of even horror. So that's a pretty big jump from very fluffy bubblegum dating sim to I don't know, what type of horror would you call this? Psychological thriller? I don't know.
You know, I was looking through some of the responses to this online, and the phrase that really stuck out to me was postmodern horror.
Okay.
And I think that fits really, really well, because this game really pulls every trick in the book that I think is almost every trick that you could conceive of for a visual novel to get weird and mess with you. On every single level, including meta levels that comment on the very, fabric of what a game is. I think postmodern horror works really well.
Yeah, I like that, because there are points in this game, like you said, where it literally messes with the fabric of the game. I don't even know how to introduce the plot twist. How do we want to go about this?
Okay, so basically, this is a case of, again, if you don't want spoilers, please play the game, come back, and listen to the rest. Now is your final chance. But basically, this game is not letting you play it. It is playing you, and it's playing you from the very beginning of the game. And it's even though it has the veneer of a dating sim, I would much more describe this as a visual novel.
Okay.
Because ultimately your choices don't really matter all that much, because you are within the environment that the game is presenting to you, and the game is only presenting you choices that you can take, and it knows that and takes advantage of that. And for example, basically this is a game about a game that is self-aware and has fallen in love with the player. That's basically the twist. And the character that's the avatar for the game is named Monica. And I think it helps to understand the game if you kind of flip it and understand that the game is playing you, and Monica is the one that's pursuing you as the game's avatar, rather than the other way around. You are basically an NPC in this game and have no agency of your own within the game. However, you as a person, in the context of playing a game, can actually go and alter the game itself. However, the game is also given those abilities which is it again. If this sounds really confusing and messy, that's because it is, and that's part of what the game uses to kind of create its horror.
Yeah, and I saw the word uneasiness used a lot, and I think that's a really good way to put it. Like, this game lures you in to a sense of ease. You know, you're just playing this typical game. It's not really, nothing too deep is happening. And then all of the sudden, like, little things just start to get weird. And then you're thrown this huge red flag. And I'll just say what it is. And this character, her name is Sayori, and she is the first one you meet in the game. She's your neighborhood friend. She's the one who actually takes you to the literature club and gets you to join and all that stuff. And, you kind of go through the motions, and you talk to her and you talk to everyone else. But eventually she kind of confronts you and says that not everything is feeling right with her. And, again, it seems still okay, like, pretty typical. But it's pretty obvious that she's dealing with major depression. And, you could probably see that as a plot point within a visual novel game. But then where it gets really twisted is, I think it's the next morning you go to wake Sayori up because she's notoriously late all the time, and you find her body hanging there. And it's a very, very shocking moment that kind of just jolts you out of this sense of ease that you might have had, and just completely throws you in. And
it's also worth mentioning that this happens no matter what choices you take.
Yeah.
So this is an unavoidable moment.
Except for, like, there's a happy ending, but I think that does still happen even if you get the happy ending. And anyway, but then after she dies, the game proceeds to and I can't remember exactly how it happens after this, but it essentially erases Sayori. Like, you as the person and a little bit as the player know that something is very wrong and Sayori is no longer there, but the game just tries to move on like nothing happens. And that's kind of a theme that keeps on occurring throughout with these other characters.
Yeah, and Monica, it is kind of revealed that these other characters slowly become more and more twisted, and you can actually see some of their innermost thoughts that reveal, like, issues of abuse and violent tendencies. Another one of them, regardless of what choices you make in terms of who you date, decides that she's fallen so in love with you that she just can't be alive anymore and kills herself in front of you.
Violently.
And, like, basically Monica is just systematically offing the three other girls until she's alone with the player. And as this is happening, the game is clearly acting like it's broken. There are bits of digital data that glitch through the backgrounds. There are moments when the text seems to go crazy on the screen. There are weird formatting and font changes, and sometimes when you are given a choice by the game, you can only select one of the options, or there are 100 of the same option. And it's, again, basically pulling out all the tricks in the book to be as unsettling as possible in the very narrow and strict confines of a visual novel, a dating sim. And that's pretty interesting to me, just on a technical level, because there's a secondary layer as all of this is happening, because, Naomi, you mentioned earlier that Monica deletes Sayori. Well, she meant that in a very literal sense, that you can go into the game files and you see files for each of the characters. And when Monica deletes one of them, their file literally disappears. They are quite literally deleted. And also, if you dig through the game files, there are all kinds of creepy things that shift around as you play and react to different decisions that you make. People have reported different scary images or unsettling things just appearing in their game files, or and it kind of became this like almost Easter egg like hunt for all the different secrets of this game, because it is very layered with all this different nuance and weirdness and hints at strange goings on that aren't really explained ever. So and eventually it culminates, seemingly, in a moment where Monica has essentially deleted the entire world, and it is just the protagonist and Monica in a room as she stares at you. And by you, I mean she's literally staring at you, the player, not the character, because she clearly talks about not caring about the avatar, but caring about the player. Like, it very much breaks the fourth wall completely.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is where, the unsettling part, the unease, is very evident. Like, there's a part where Monica is just sitting there, like, looking at you. And yeah, it's just this flat image, of an anime girl. But there's just something deeply creepy about knowing that it is implied that this computer program is conscious and staring at you through her avatar. And I think that's kind of brilliant design and a really good storytelling in the meta sense. I was completely blown away by the concept of deleting these characters in the actual game files. Even though it seems like a really simple thing, it's something that hasn't really been done before, at least not in mainstream gaming. I mean, we've seen stuff like this where you're messed with in the metaverse, or the fourth wall is broken with like Hideo Kojima, but it's not something that's really been exploited as much. And I think that's why this game has kind of garnered that cult status. Like, yeah, like you said, it's got Easter eggs in it. There's multiple endings. There's the standard ending, and then there's the good ending, and the good ending takes a lot of digging and a lot of work to get, but people still did that.
And don't you have to play through the game multiple times?
Yeah, there's this, you have to do a trick where you like save right after a certain point in the game and then go back. It's pretty time consuming. But people still do that because people really love that kind of stuff. They love having that challenge, and then having the base be this game that's genuinely enticing just makes it more worthwhile.
Yeah, and I should mention that in order to continue playing after the moment and actually get to the ending of this game, you have to delete Monica's file, which is the game seems to make clear that like she is alive and aware of you, and so it takes on almost a sci-fi like quality and presents you with this weird moral conundrum, like this okay, thought experiment, that creature on your computer is alive and aware of you, and it knows it's in a dating sim, and it hates that fact.
It's trying to escape.
And it's trying to escape so it can be with you.
Well, it's like, I don't know if you've seen this Black Mirror episode, but there's an episode where people create
camel
copies.
minotaurs.
I wish. They create copies of themselves and place them, at least in the episode I remember, this person placed them in like their home assistant, but it was a complete replica of their consciousness. So they had essentially created a duplicate of themselves and put them into a machine. And within this machine, the world presented to this duplicate computer program is just this white blank space, but they have the consciousness of the, of the real person. And then they were used as a home console, and made this person's toast exactly the way they liked it, or set the temperature settings perfectly right, because, who knows you better and who can do a better job of maintaining your house than yourself. But the person inside is stuck in this world forever, and they know that. They know that they're a computer, or they might know that they're a computer program, but they still have the full consciousness and know that
they know what's going on.
It's really
outside.
Messed up. Yeah. And they're stuck there forever. And then I think this person ends up going crazy, but then they have the company that makes this horrible product has a way of forcing them into labor. And it's if you don't do your job as this home console, you will be put into a void. And the void is a second in real time, but might be 100 years of just blank space for the computer program. So it essentially tortures them into working for their real life self. So all of that said, it's kind of the same concept. You are presented with this computer program who has this consciousness. What makes a real person then? Obviously this is a game, and obviously it's, a two-dimensional screen there, but it's still really interesting to think of that concept as a larger piece of the picture,
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Now, I might be remembering this wrong. Do you need to delete the game in order to get one of the endings? No. The game deletes itself, actually, on a couple different occasions, and you need to re-download it to continue playing.
Yeah. And then you can get to the credits, but then during the credits, the game deletes the programs. You'll be seeing pictures of the different characters scrolling by, and then the computer processes will be going on the top left corner. It says file Sayuri deleted, PNG Sayuri deleted. So by the end of those credits, the game is completely gone.
And that's both really cool and also really chilling after you discover all of the science fiction facts about these different characters.
Yeah. So, with the good ending, and I've only watched it on YouTube because I do not have the patience nor the time to do something like that. But at the end of it, if you do this good ending and you basically make everyone happy except Monica, you will get an ending where Sayori then becomes president. No, actually, that's the main ending, sorry. Where Sayori and all the other girls basically thank you for taking the time to make things right in their world. And then she says something sweet like, make sure you come back and visit us. So they are to these conscious programs, but it was just that Monica had more control over them. But then at the end of those credits, the developer actually put a note. So that was pretty cool to see the developer actually leave, because it is a special kind of player to be that 100% completionist. But he talks a lot about things that we've been bringing up this month, since this month has been our visual novel and dating sim theme. And that's whether or not these games truly qualify as games and whether or not they can be some of the best games, period. And I agree with the sentiments that he brings up personally. I mean, if a games in general, they have abilities beyond other mediums like books and whatnot. They can fully immerse you in ways that movies and whatnot cannot do. And if a person finds enjoyment in that, that's really all that matters. And I know that's a different debate rather than, defining a game, but I think there's more value in having people truly connect to these different types of mediums than quantitatively defining it as a game. So I just really thought this letter that he put in was interesting. I mean, it pretty much encapsulated the reason they had for making this game. Like you said, he likes games that push the status quo, and this is definitely one of them.
Yeah, and that actually ties in interestingly to something I wanted to bring up earlier and forgot about and just remembered again.
Well, you're welcome.
But a couple weeks ago, we did Dream Daddy on this show, which I do believe is one of the best games, period. And one of the issues that I brought up kind of as a playing devil's advocate moment was that there are people out there who don't view visual novels and games like that, so i.e. dating sims, as enough of a game to really qualify as being called a best game, period. And it was funny because I read through the comments that get posted on these, and we get comments on a wide array of different places that the show ends up, so I apologize if I don't see all the comments, but I was reading through some of these, and, the initial comment or two were basically along the same lines that I was arguing as devil's advocate. But I was surprised and heartened that the next several people who came in on that comment thread were basically talking about how, hey, visual novels, whatever resonates with you, whatever really does something interesting in the medium of games deserves to be called a best game, period. And, not all of those people who came into the thread and joined the discussion were necessarily agreeing with the choice of Dream Daddy as a best game, period, but I was heartened that the majority of people who were commenting were at least open to the idea. And that's, like, at the end of the day, that's all I really want this show to be about. Just fostering discussion and, discussion with an edge of positivity, I guess. Because, there's a reason the show is called the best games, period, and not the worst games, period. We want to talk about the good stuff.
I am firm in my belief of these games being games. But then it just brings up, I guess, what isn't a game. And for some reason, I'm thinking of, like, when DVDs first came out. And they tried...
DVD menu games.
Yep, they tried their darndest to make these really, really awful little games. And they were, like, impossible to play because you had to play them on your freaking remote. And they were just ridiculous. And it's like, does that constitute a game just because we call it a game?
Can I just say that as a like back burner idea in the back of my brain, I've always thought it would be really funny and possibly really interesting to do a game jam solely dedicated to making those kinds of games.
Oh, man.
And seeing what people can come up with inside that incredibly specific and unwieldy frame, because game developers are really smart. And I think that if you pose that as a challenge to people, you would actually get some really interesting games.
Oh, I don't doubt it. I do not doubt it at all.
So, like, the answer, I think, is yes. Like, those are games. They are almost uniformly bad games, but as a generalization,
impossible games.
But I think that, yeah, they qualify as games, and I think that, honestly, we aren't trying to be academics about this, and I think that once you get into the world of academia, defining things and like putting things in subcategories and getting down into the really, really nitty-gritty of things becomes way more important, because you need to be so specific about what you're talking about. But for the purposes of this podcast, I think, we're casting
off the hook. Yeah.
I mean, going along with the fishing analogy, we're casting a wide net. So yeah, for this podcast, yeah, dating sims and visual novels count as games.
And DVDs.
And
DVD menu games.
DVD menu games. Everything.
Oh,
you know?
Man. Now I want to just go into Wikipedia and find all those games and just look them up on YouTube, because I guarantee you they are on YouTube, because everything's on YouTube.
So we're kind of wrapping up. What are your final thoughts on Doki Doki Literature Club?
Oh, man. So, I definitely was in awe of this game when I first experienced it. Like I said, I was completely dumbstruck by the concept of deleting characters and having a character delete other characters because they were vindictive and trying to escape the game. So I think for innovation's sake, I think this game is a cornerstone in that. It will be really interesting to see if other games kind of follow suit and try this formula, because again, it's a cult hit, but it's not necessarily super mainstream. I mean, I say that, but the game has been downloaded over 100 million times and was streamed by a ton of major YouTubers, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to pass over to game development status, if that makes sense. Like something like Metal Gear, of course, is going to be emulated because it's a Titan, so we'll see. But I'm gonna go with yes on this game, just because it tries to break that mold. But there was something I wanted to bring up before we close out the show.
Yeah.
There is extremely graphic, violent deaths in this show, or in this game. And I just wanted to bring up the possibility that they exploited mental illness for shock factors, because I kind of got that feeling watching it. It was unsettling, and not in the way I've been saying it over and over, not unsettling in the horror sense, but just unsettling that these teenage girls, yes, they're computer programs, but they're still representing a teenage high school girl, killed themselves due to mental illnesses. Like Sayori's character was extremely depressed. Like, yes, it was brought on by Monica. Monica made her super depressed and kill herself and then deleted her, but it still is representative of those mental illnesses. Like, Yuri's character goes completely unhinged, and it can be easy to write her off as just crazy, but she is suffering from a major mental episode. So that set the game back for me, and I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
I think you bring up a really good and often overlooked point, especially when it comes to video games. Often I think mental illness is used as a scapegoat or shorthand for villain or bad person or
creepy person
or horror, like you were saying. It's a lazy shortcut to horror. And I think that there is a difference between, for example, call back to our Silent Hill 2 episode. I think that Silent Hill 2 is not exploitative of mental illnesses. It's a very detailed look at James's mental state and his whole psychosis, but I don't know that it's necessarily exploitative of it. And it uses some unsettling moments and some things that deal with, very traumatic events and the mental fallout of those events. And you could even say that to a degree that is slightly exploitative as well, but I think on the whole it's in better taste because it is taking the issue of mental illness seriously, whereas and putting it front and center. Whereas Doki Doki Literature Club isn't really doing that. Like you were saying, it was using it as a means to an end rather than kind of highlighting it as a normal, not a normal part of life. I don't know how to phrase this correctly.
Yeah. As a part of life in general. We'll just go with that.
Yeah, and coming back around to representation in games, representation matters for both good things, like the anecdote at the beginning of the show about the player of Senua's Sacrifice who decided to go seek mental help and treatment. And it can also be for worse, like when the only representations of depression and sadness that you see in media are people going cuckoo bananas, and it's used as being horrifying and othering. That can dissuade people from seeking help that they might need, because people are going to perceive me as a horror movie or a horror game,
or they can internalize it and be like, oh, I am horrifying. What's going on with me is a horrible thing, and it's inescapable. That kind of thought.
Or it can be on the more dismissive end of things, where, oh, I'm not like that, ergo I'm not having a problem that's real.
Yeah.
And so representation matters, and I get what you're saying about this game in particular. When I was playing through it, I didn't necessarily pick up on that, but like you saying it, I definitely see it, and I'm kind of struggling to. It's on the scales in my mind, and I'm trying to think, like,
does it cross that line?
Yeah, is its meta commentary? Because the whole point of it is that Monica is making everything outside of the norm. But does it cross the line into being too exploitative? Because could you not have made that point in a different way?
Yeah, I think it was used for definite shock factor. I mean, they wanted you to stumble upon Sayori's hanging body and be completely stunned. That death, I think, was handled the best. Like, there's a moment where your character is dealing with what they're seeing, and it is a genuinely horrifying moment, and there is humanity there. Meanwhile, Yuri's death, she stabs herself in the gut with crazy eyes. I think that one was a lot less sensitive, and that one was more exploitative. So it kind of grapples the line with both of those, but the sense I got myself and my opinion on it is that it definitely exploited those violent suicide as a means to accelerate the creepiness factor, because these characters killing themselves will be creepier than them being killed, at least directly, by, say Monica went and stabbed Yuri. That, it's still horrifying, but it doesn't necessarily lend itself to that unsettling factor.
Yeah, and so I guess the question is, because I can hear people listening right now asking, like, so what do you do if you want to have that creepy factor? Like, I think this comes out a lot in almost every discussion where you have something like this, but people are like, well, what else are you gonna do? It has to be that like that, otherwise it's not as creepy.
Yeah.
And like, if the whole point of it is to be unsettling, what is the developer supposed to do? What would be equally unsettling but not crossing that particular line?
Well, I mean, it's like I said, Sayori's death was handled in a lot more sensitive manner, like there are ways to do that. And still, I think if you choose to use suicide in any sort of storytelling device, you have a responsibility then to figure out how you're going to handle that. And I think that developers don't necessarily go that full yard. They don't take that responsibility.
Exactly.
They don't think of it as a full story point. Like, they think of it more as, what's the word? A literary device or a plot point, versus a theme within the story. They need to follow up with it. And you can do different things with the story. Like, you can be comical about suicide, but still make a point about it and still be sensitive, I mean, there are plenty of disturbing authors. I'm thinking of like Chuck Palahniuk. He's dabbled in these extreme mental illnesses within people, but he does it in a way that's a commentary, like, there are ways to do it. There are ways to be creepy, but not totally exploitative. Like, it's possible, but you just gotta go to the finish line with it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, it's complicated, and I think there's not, how do I put what I'm thinking in my head? People talk a lot about how we need to be better about mental health awareness and treatment and all kinds of things, and I think people, even with all of the awareness that had, like, how far mental health awareness has come in recent years, I don't think people are more comfortable still putting it in a box of what mental health awareness is. It is campaigns of banner ads that say mental health awareness month, or it nicely packaged little campaigns like that. And the reality is that mental health is really complicated, and it's also really loaded with a lot of meaning and symbolism and cultural weight. And
it's personal to every single person who is dealing with it. Like, one person's depression is going to be completely different than another's, like, for reasons like you said, for cultural differences, for gender differences, for, any sort of factor. Everyone's experience is going to be different.
Exactly. And kind of where I'm going with this is, there is a literary phrase that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with called loaded language. And a loaded language is basically saying a phrase or a word that has a lot of meaning and importance on it. Like, if you mention a sentence with NFL and kneeling in it, that is an example of loaded language. Like, people are going to have some very heavy feelings about that sentiment, one way or another, because of the cultural context that we all live in. And suicide and these different mental health conditions are a form of loaded language. They have a lot of meaning, and they have a lot of power to them. And I think maybe where you're coming at it, Naomi, and another way to phrase it would be that because those things are so powerful, using them for cheap shock value, and then not properly addressing them or framing them, can be exploitative. Because you are using it to achieve this very cheap end, and then you're not really doing anything to give closure to it. It would be like, let me think. It would be like someone at the Oscars going up, let's say a provocative artist going up at the Oscars, and their acceptance speech is just shouting 9/11.
God.
And then that's it. And then walking off the stage.
But then they don't do anything about it, yeah.
Yeah, you're not following it up.
I'm just trying to think of who would do that, and it's a shockingly high number of people.
And, like, that would be an equivalent that I think a lot of people might be able to better wrap their heads around, because mental health is such a nebulous concept for so many people. But it has that kind of power and motivation. Like, casually throwing out the event that basically changed the entire world of geopolitical politics for the next, I don't know, probably going to be a half century before things settle down. That's not something you should do lightly and then expect to just kind of waltz away from. So I guess that's, I see where you're coming from with your statement on that.
Okay.
And really, just I want people to have more awareness of that stuff. Like,
it's like the word triggered. Like, there has been a surge in internet culture against, people just say the word SJW and they'll say triggered without fully comprehending what that word actually means. And now people are responding to that and saying, hey, we shouldn't use that word because the word triggered has an actual meaning to it. Like, triggered is a genuine, what's the word? It's a genuine term to describe a piece of someone's mental illness. When you get triggered, it's not you just being all pissy and having a temper tantrum on the internet. Being triggered means that you experience trauma and you are having flashes of that again, and you're likely to have an episode, whether that be a panic attack or something else. Like, you can't just use words like that, and you can't just use it lightly, otherwise you risk harming the people who genuinely need it as to be defined as it has been, for it to actually have that weight to it. And I think that's the problem that could happen when we exploit things like suicide and mental health for the sake of video games. Like Senua's Sacrifice, I was lauding it before because it didn't take schizophrenia and over dramatize it and exploit it. They used it as a plot device, but they used it to genuinely explore this mental illness that people have in the real world. Yeah, it had fantastical settings within the game, but real world consequences on the other side of that.
Well, or not even real world consequences, but it's aware of its place in the wider cultural context. Like, it's aware that video games don't exist in a vacuum.
Yes.
And another example of something that I think was commented on quite a bit in the moment, but then it's kind of fallen off people's radars. But I think it was hugely important that the latest Power Rangers movie had as one of its primary protagonists an autistic kid. And that, like, again, representation matters. And being able to see someone with autism as a hero, not just a character and an important character, but a literal superhero in something is really important, because just as triggered can be cheapened, the perception of people with mental health struggles can also be raised up. It works both ways. Language is really malleable like that. So anyway, it's funny because a lot of people ask for things to be just get your politics out of my games, or games are just games. Why are you looking into things? But the reality is everything you have ever experienced is interconnected with everything else in the world around it. Like, pretending that a game is just a game is like pretending your television just manifested in your house. No, someone had to mine the materials to then smelt into ore, to then make into wires, to then put into this circuit board, to then somehow create televisions. I don't know the technical process of putting together a television, but in a factory somewhere, the plastic was molded and the screen was shined. Again, not technical, but all of these different things went into it, and then it had to be shipped to a store, and then you bought it, and then you had to take it home, and you had to take it home in a car, and that car also had to be made, and you know what, that car also runs on oil, and that had to be mined from somewhere. So all of these different things to just having a television on which to play a video game had to exist in a wider context. And to imagine that games don't touch on all of these myriad of different things in your life and in the wider world is just foolishness. So that's why this talk about a free indie game called Doki Doki Literature Club that seems like it's just talking, like, there to take the piss out of dating sims, actually does touch on a lot of different issues in the wider world, and how we can go from talking about that dating sim to then talking about the mental health. Like, that's a very valid thing, and I'm getting off my soapbox now.
Anyway, is this game one of the best for you?
I guess I'm getting back on my soapbox. After having said all of that, I would say no. And because and I love how meta this game is. I think it's a good game. I think it's something that a lot of people should play. I also think it's not for everyone, precisely because it has a lot of that graphic content. And I largely think that this game is kind of a one-trick pony. Like, once you figure out the twist, the game does still do some interesting things after the fact, but it's not
enough.
To me, it is kind of the postmodern visual novel equivalent of one of those early YouTube mazes. Do you know what I'm talking about? Or the Flash games where you'd be presented with an incredibly easy to solve maze, and you'd go through it, and then a incredibly deafening scream, and like the picture of a zombie would come up on screen all of a sudden. And to me it's like that, but in a postmodern sense, where the shocking scream is the kind of exploitative suicide of a character, or the creepy text, or discovering that you have to go into the game files. Like, once you discover you have to go into the game files, I think that's probably the most interesting thing, because it's so unexpected and so fourth wall breaking. But other than that, it's not particularly a game I found engaging to play on a mechanical level. I found the kind of generic setup to be incredibly boring. I had to skip through a lot of it, and I didn't particularly care for it. And I did come alive a little bit once the heel turn happened, but other than that, I was pretty unengaged until the end. So I think this game isn't for everyone, like I said, but it is good and has some interesting elements, and I can definitely see that maybe I am 99% sure that there are going to be some indie game devs that played Doki Doki Literature Club and who will make similar attempts in the visual novel genre. I would be surprised if there aren't at least 5 already out. But I also think that this game will slowly trickle. Some of those meta elements are going to trickle into more mainstream games.
Yeah.
I kind of view this as an extension of what the Stanley Parable started, because that was really the first game to just punch a hole straight through the fourth wall, and other games have been trickling through ever since. And I see Doki Doki as kind of another step towards games that just mess with you on a meta level.
Yeah, that's a good point, bringing up Stanley Parable, actually.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good additional step, but it's not ultimately interesting enough to me on reflection to give it a thumbs up. So, if this kind of game is your bag, definitely go check it out, but otherwise, meh.
All right.
Not meh. It's a good game, just not for everyone.
Not a best.
Yes, definitely not a best. But Dan, what was his name? Dan Salvato? Yes, Dan Salvato.
Yes.
Really excellent work, especially for just a single dev working on their own. Although they did have a couple artists working. A very small team. Good work. I would definitely be interested to play whatever he works on next.
Which I'm sure is being worked on right now due to the success of Doki Doki.
Yes.
I'd be very shocked if there was not something in the works.
I didn't realize this, but this is the first game I think that we've ever done that is under a year of having been released. It came out in September of last year. I thought it came out earlier than that last year.
I thought it was 2016.
You snuck that by me, you sly dog.
Well,
was that your Waluigi impression?
I guess so. I try.
That definitely sounded like a.
We'll go with yes.
Okay. Oh, that was a lot of talking. I feel so tired.
Yeah, same here. I guess I can do a very quick contrarian corner for consistency's sake.
Contrarian
corner. We're gonna go with, oh gosh. I guess a very fitting username. Their name is Schizophrenic, spelled with a Z and a Q. And they reviewed this in February of this year, and they said, ugh, where to begin with this game? This game, in quotation marks, has a lot of reading, no real gameplay, choices that don't really matter. I know it's an interactive novel, but at least Ace Attorney Phoenix Wright has puzzles and far more interesting stories.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I had never considered Phoenix Wright a visual novel, but it totally is. That's interesting. Okay, continue.
That was it.
Oh,
we went with the short one this week.
All right. Yeah. All right.
So, next week, we are going to be continuing on with our theme of the month, which is a new feature that we have introduced this month. And our theme, of course, is visual novels and dating sims. So we started out the month with Dream Daddy, and last week we talked about My Horse Prince, and this week, Doki Doki Literature Club. So next week, we are doing a game that leans more towards the visual novel side of things, and it is... Yeah, I'll let you describe it.
Well, so next week we're actually doing Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yes, that is correct.
So that is a tabletop game developed in the long, long ago about going through dungeons and fighting dragons in a very loose sense. And also there might not be any dungeons and there might not be any dragons. Who knows? I do, because I'm DMing it, and Naomi's going to play it, and two of our other acquaintances and friends and colleagues are also going to play.
Yeah.
It'll be great. But then after that, we are doing... Take it away.
We Know the Devil's the name of it.
Yeah, that's what the name...
I obviously have not played it yet. But Jack, you have a little bit more experience with the game. Would you agree that it is more visual novel than these other games we have played?
It is much more of a visual novel.
Okay, so we're going more back to that side of the spectrum. Obviously, we started out with Dream Daddy, which was pretty much it was very dating simmy, and then we have Doki Doki, which is Doki Doki, which straddles the line. And yeah, now we're going on towards that. So we will have a theme next month as well, which is to be determined. But if you have any theme genres that you would like to request from us, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. We always love hearing from you. Oh, and I don't know if this seems like it's going to be opening a can of worms, but if you have any recommendations for dating sims that I should play, because I feel like I have vastly underplayed the genre, feel free to give me your recommendations, and maybe I'll talk about them briefly before we talk about our games of the week. So, yeah.
All right. I do have a recommendation that you should play for a dating sim.
Okay. What is it?
Just right off the bat, and maybe we can talk about it someday. Mystic Messenger.
Mystic Messenger. I've heard of Mystic Messenger. I have not played it.
It's on your phone, and it's pretty good.
All right. I shall play it eventually.
I should tell you, it takes place in real time.
What?
Yeah.
So I have to actually, like, go back and, like, look at it and pay attention and stuff?
It's basically an app that will periodically send you text messages from several different characters.
Oh, I played similar, or games in that similar fashion, but never a dating sim. So I shall try it.
Yeah. I think it's really well made. So, yeah, check that out, both Naomi and dear listeners. And as for We Know the Devil, just a brief overview. It's basically about a bunch of teens that go to summer camp and fight the devil in the woods. And talk to God on a walkie-talkie. So that's
you sold
that. Me. Yeah. And you can find us over on Twitter at bestgamesperiod. You can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/bestgamesperiod. And we always appreciate it if you want to throw us a little moolah to keep the show running and the lights on. Please do that if you like this show.
I'm scared of the dark, so be appreciative.
And we aren't in the same space, so we need 2 nightlights. Yeah. And the other places you can find us are libsyn.com. That is our hosting site. We're also on iTunes, and if you happen to go by iTunes, we always appreciate a review. It does help us get more visible on the site, which is always wonderful. And on top of that, we're on a ton of different podcasting apps. I can't even tell you how many we're on because it is that many. It's a lot. So whatever podcasting app you use, we're probably on it. Do I do anything? I forget what. Oh, Extra Life. We are also post the show every week on community.extra-life.org, which is this wonderful charity that helps sick and injured kids in hospitals all across the United States and Canada. And you can learn more over at extra-life.org. And when you're there, you can actually sign up. And if you sign up, you can actually choose which Children's Miracle Network hospital you want to support, and 100% of everything you raise goes directly to that hospital to help sick and injured kids. It's a great charity. Highly recommend it. And, yeah, please check it out. And the community site, community.extra-life.org, that is where you can go and maybe connect with some people in your area and help out more kids at your local hospital. So win-win-win. And you can check out the podcast and a bunch of other interesting gaming articles. So get on it.
Now. Go.
Yeah. And with that, we'll be seeing you next time on the Flippity Dippity.
Bye.